Dante Moretti was the symbol of corporate success. CEO of one of the country's largest financial holdings, owner of an immeasurable fortune, and a frequent face on business magazine covers. His strategic decisions were infallible, and his leadership inspired both admiration and envy in equal measure. But power always attracts enemies, and the most dangerous one was right by his side. Lucio Amaral, his longtime partner and friend, was a charismatic figure, but behind his facade lay a soul corroded by greed. He devised a brilliant and cruel plan to take over Dante's empire. One morning, Dante was awakened by a persistent knock at the door of his luxurious penthouse. When he opened it, he found armed police officers. They handcuffed him without explanation. The charges: corporate fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement of billions. In the following days, he was the target of a relentless investigation. His assets were frozen, and the media crucified him. Meanwhile, Lucio presented himself as the company's savior, taking full control. Dante swore his innocence, but all the evidence pointed against him. His lawyer abandoned the case, and his so-called friends disappeared. Betrayed, exposed, and humiliated, he was sentenced to a long prison term. One night, during his transfer to a maximum security prison, the vehicle was ambushed. Amidst the chaos, Dante managed to escape, wounded and aimless. Now, he was a fugitive, a marked man stripped of his identity and wealth. As he wandered through the dark, cold streets, the weight of betrayal and injustice wrapped around his mind like invisible chains. He didn't know yet that his fight was just beginning. The nights in the city were unforgiving. The biting cold and constant hunger turned every day into a silent battle. Dante Moretti, once a powerful tycoon, was now just another forgotten face on the streets. He roamed the filthy alleys, wearing tattered clothes found in dumpsters. His face was obscured by a scruffy beard, and his once confident gaze now reflected pain and exhaustion. At first, he refused help. The humiliation was too heavy a burden to bear. But hunger overcame his pride. Seeking shelter under an old bridge, he found a group of homeless people gathered around an improvised fire. Among them were Miguel, a war veteran with an amputated leg, and Rosa, a woman who had fled an abusive relationship. "We don't ask where you came from here," Miguel said, handing him a piece of hardened bread. "Only if you're willing to survive." Weeks passed, and Dante learned the invisible rules of the streets: how to find scraps of food, avoid dangers, and remain invisible to the police. He never mentioned who he was or what he had lost. Despite that, he couldn't suppress his leadership nature. When a local gang tried to evict the group from their shelter, Dante faced them with calm ferocity. Using strategy and cunning, he managed to outsmart them and protect his newfound companions. The streets were merciless, but also taught Dante lessons in humanity that the corporate world never could. He became a kind of mentor to the other homeless people, helping them find odd jobs and organize makeshift support networks. Still, his memories haunted him. Fragments of the last days before his downfall surfaced in disjointed nightmares. A suspicious contract, a tense meeting with Lucio, the signing of documents he couldn't remember. Something was missing. Something crucial. One stormy night, under a heavy sky, Dante gazed at the brightly lit city in the distance. Among the shadows of the towering corporations, he knew the truth was hidden, buried beneath lies and betrayals, and he would do whatever it took to unearth it. The night was cold, and the deserted streets seemed to breathe danger. Dante walked through the dark alleys near an old abandoned subway station. The unsettling silence kept him on high alert, Life on the streets had taught him that something bad could happen at any moment. A desperate scream shattered the stillness. He froze for a moment, his heart pounding. Without thinking twice, he ran toward the sound. Turning a corner, he saw two men cornering a young woman against a wall. She struggled to break free, her eyes wide with fear. "Hey!" Dante shouted, his voice filled with authority. "Get away from her!" The men turned, sizing him up quickly. He advanced with determined steps, his gaze fierce and threatening. Realizing a confrontation wasn't worth the risk, they backed off, releasing the woman before disappearing into the darkness. Dante approached cautiously, noticing she was still trembling. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, breathing heavily. Her eyes met his, filled with both fear and relief. Something about her face seemed familiar, but he couldn't place where he'd seen her before. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to control the wave of memories threatening to resurface. "Anna. Anna Albuquerque," she replied, still gasping for air. The name hit him like an electric shock. Anna was the daughter of Victor Albuquerque, one of the most powerful businessmen in the country, and someone he suspected was deeply involved in the conspiracy that destroyed his life. Before he could react, distant sirens echoed through the streets. Anna looked at him, alarmed. "We need to get out of here. They might come back. Or worse." Dante nodded without hesitation and guided her through the dark alleys. He knew every shortcut, every blind spot in the city. After several tense minutes of fleeing, they found shelter in an abandoned building, far from the patrol routes. Still catching her breath, she finally asked, "Why did you help me?" Her voice carried a mixture of suspicion and gratitude. Dante looked at her, his gaze loaded with something deeper than simple altruism. "Because I know what it's like when no one comes to save you." At that moment, Anna realized she was standing before someone marked by a dark past. And Dante, though still unsure of the full meaning, knew that this encounter would change the course of his fight for the truth. The following days were tense. Dante knew he couldn't ignore who Anna was, or what her connection to Victor Albuquerque could mean. But something within her seemed to be shifting, doubts and restlessness that hadn't been there before. Anna spent sleepless nights reflecting on what she had discovered since meeting Dante. The brutality of the attack, his cold efficiency in saving her, and the shocking revelation about her father. She had always known Victor Albuquerque was ruthless in business, but she thought it was just part of the corporate game. Now, she could no longer turn a blind eye. After days of hesitation, Anna decided to confront Dante. "I know you recognized me that night," she said firmly. "Who are you really?" Dante considered his response for a moment. Running away was no longer an option. "My name is Dante Moretti," he said, his voice steady but tinged with bitterness. "And your father helped destroy my life." The revelation hit her like a punch. She vaguely remembered headlines from years ago. A corporate tycoon accused of financial crimes, imprisoned, then disappeared. But it all seemed so distant. Until now. I didn't know. "My father never mentioned you," she said, still processing. "He wouldn't have. Men like him erase the past," Dante retorted. "But now I'm here, and I'm going to uncover everything." Even though she was shaken, Anna couldn't ignore one crucial detail. If Dante was right, her father wasn't the man she thought she knew. And if he was wrong, someone much more powerful was manipulating everything from the shadows. Determined to do what was right, she proposed the next step. My father's company is hiring private security for a new operation. If you can get in, you'll have access to the main building." Dante knew it was dangerous, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. With an improvised haircut and a clean shave, he was unrecognizable. He assumed a false identity, posing as a former soldier looking for work. 12 years earlier, Dante had founded that company. Now, he was back, dressed as a security guard, patrolling hallways he had once helped design. The conspiracy wasn't just alive, it was growing, and this time, Dante wouldn't be a pawn in the game. Dante Moretti was back in the world he had built, but this time from the shadows. Disguised as a security guard, he walked through the corridors of the company he had once created, hidden by anonymity. Every door, every meeting room reminded him of what had been taken from him. But he was no longer the same man. With Anna's help, he gained access to confidential information without raising suspicion. For weeks, they worked together, digging through hidden files and falsified financial reports. One night, Dante stumbled upon something that made him freeze. There were contracts linked to shell companies, disguised financial transactions, and signatures on multimillion-dollar transfers. Some bore the name of Lucio Amaral, his ex-partner and traitor. But what truly made him tremble was seeing his own forged signature on money laundering documents. Those contracts not only incriminated him, but also showed that Lucio was still using his name to cover up illegal business dealings. Dante hadn't just been betrayed. He was still being used as a scapegoat. During a late-night security shift, Dante heard a strange noise coming from the loading area. Something felt off. Silently, he followed the sound, his steps precise and steady. Reaching the loading docks, he found two men tampering with sealed containers, using tools that didn't match those of ordinary thieves. They were after something valuable. "Freeze!" Dante commanded, his voice firm and authoritative. The two intruders stiffened, assessing the situation. One began to back away, but the other decided to charge at Dante. Instinct kicked in. Dante sidestepped the attack and countered with a swift, precise move, bringing the attacker down. The second man bolted through the dark corridors. Dante pursued him, his steps echoing like a ticking countdown. When he finally caught up, the intruder tried to escape again, but Dante managed to hold him briefly before he slipped away through an emergency exit. Frustrated, Dante returned to the loading area, scanning the scene. That's when he noticed something small lying near the containers, a digital storage device. He quickly pocketed it before the night guards arrived to investigate the commotion. Later, at the hideout where he and Honor met in secret, they worked tirelessly to access the data on the device. When they finally decoded it, what they found was far worse than expected. The files contained fraudulent contracts, suspicious financial transfers, and illegal agreements involving restricted items, all tracing back to Lucio Amaral. But there was a chilling twist. Lucio wasn't acting alone. Someone bigger, more powerful, and still unidentified was financing the entire operation. Dante realized he wasn't just up against a traitor. He had infiltrated a far more dangerous network than he'd ever imagined. He was no longer running. Now, he was hunting. During one of her late-night investigations, Honor stumbled upon something disturbing while cross-referencing financial records. Her father, Victor Albuquerque, was tied to several suspicious transactions. His name never appeared directly, but the connection was too clear to be a coincidence. "This can't be right," Honor whispered, her eyes glued to the computer screen. Dante approached, analyzing the evidence with icy precision. There was no room for doubt. Victor Albuquerque was neck-deep in the conspiracy. "He's not just involved," Dante said, his voice heavy with bitterness. "He's one of the central players in this game." Anna's stomach turned. Her father had always been distant, cold, and obsessed with power, but imagining him as a criminal mastermind was almost too much to process. Determined to find the truth, Anna made a bold decision. She would confront Victor in person. The luxurious, spotless office was a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. She burst through the double doors without knocking. "I need to talk to you." "Now," she demanded. Victor studied her with a neutral expression, as if he already knew why she was there. "I always thought you were smarter than this," he said coldly, closing the door behind her. "But it seems I underestimated your curiosity." His calculated tone made Anna realize something terrible. Her father wasn't just involved. He was in full control. "Anna," firmly, "I know about the shell companies, the illegal transfers. Lucio Amaral might be your front, but you're the one running the entire operation." "Victor," calmly, "you think you know something, but you're just scratching the surface. There's no room for morality in this world, Anna. Everything I did was to keep you safe." Anna, defiant, "Don't use me as an excuse. This was never about me. It's always been about power." Victor's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and reluctant admiration. "Victor," darkly, "remember this. Once you cross that line, there's no going back." Anna held his gaze steadily, refusing to back down. "Anna," calm, but resolute, "get used to it. Because I'm not going back." She turned and left, leaving Victor alone, consumed by dark thoughts. For the first time, he realized he might have created an adversary as formidable as himself. The tension had reached its breaking point. With undeniable evidence in their hands, Dante and Anna knew they couldn't wait any longer. Every moment of delay risked their enemies discovering their plans. If that happened, there would be no escape. Dante understood that exposing Lucio Amaral and Victor Albuquerque meant putting their lives on the line. But running away was never an option. They had to act, and the best way to destroy powerful men like them was in the one arena they feared most: the public eye. Anna used her connections to secure invitations to the upcoming shareholders' meeting, a grand event where the media and influential executives would be present. It was the perfect stage for a final showdown. Meanwhile, Dante worked from the shadows. With help from an old contact from the streets, he acquired surveillance equipment. Every piece of evidence, fraudulent contracts, illegal transfers, incriminating messages, was meticulously organized into an undeniable presentation. "After this, there'll be no way they can deny it," Dante said, double-checking the files one last time. The conference room was packed. Executives in tailored suits, powerful investors, and journalists mingled while camera flashes lit up the space. At the center of it all stood Lucio Amaral and Victor Albuquerque, wearing cold, confident smiles as if they were untouchable. Anna, dressed as a guest, was nervous but resolute. Dante, disguised as a security technician, waited backstage. Everything was ready. As the meeting neared its conclusion, Anna abruptly stood up, drawing curious glances. "I have an urgent matter to address before we end," she announced firmly. Victor frowned. This wasn't part of the agenda. "With all due respect, Mr. Chairman," she continued, locking eyes with Lucio, "I believe we've forgotten to discuss some important transactions." She gave a subtle signal, and Dante activated the main projection system. On the massive screen behind them, damning documents began to appear. Contracts signed by Lucio, evidence of embezzlement, and even recordings of secret conversations. The room fell into a stunned silence. Whispers spread like wildfire. "This is outrageous," Lucio shouted, rising from his seat, visibly panicked. "Shut this down immediately." But it was too late. The media was already broadcasting live. Reporters shouted questions, and cameras captured every reaction. There was no escape. Victor Albuquerque, however, remained eerily calm. Unlike Lucio, he seemed prepared for anything. "You think this is enough to bring me down?" he murmured, locking eyes with Honor. "I control this company, and more importantly, I control what the public believes." Before he could act, federal agents stormed the room, accompanied by prosecutors and lawyers. They carried arrest warrants based on the very evidence presented minutes earlier. Dante emerged from the shadows, finally shedding his disguise. His gaze locked onto Lucio, who stood frozen in fear and disbelief. "I told you you'd pay," Dante whispered coldly. Victor was the last to be handcuffed, showing no emotion. As he was led away, he cast a final, chilling look at Honor. "I warned you. The price for defying me will be steep." With the villains exposed, the room descended into chaos, a storm of camera flashes, shouted questions, and disorder. But for Dante and Honor, it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new battle. The truth was finally out, but the cost would be far higher than they ever imagined. The world of Victor Albuquerque and Lucio Amaral collapsed overnight. The live broadcast of the shareholders' meeting, packed with undeniable evidence of corruption, financial fraud, and conspiracy, spread across the global media like wildfire. What was once hidden behind corporate power was now laid bare for all to see. Lucio's downfall was swift and brutal. With the overwhelming evidence, he was arrested on the spot, handcuffed before the cameras. His desperate cries echoed uselessly. "I was set up. This is a conspiracy," he protested as agents took him away. Justice had finally caught up with him. The records of illegal contracts, bribes, and money laundering were so comprehensive that no lawyer could avoid his conviction. Lucio received a harsh sentence, decades in prison with no chance of appeal. Victor Albuquerque, however, was a far more calculating adversary. As he was arrested, he showed no emotion, remaining cold and unshaken. Unlike Lucio, he didn't shout or deny anything. His eyes betrayed that he still believed he was in control. His powerful legal team moved mountains to delay the trial, but the evidence was overwhelming. Shell companies, arms deals, and international criminal operations, all traced back to him. Still, Victor managed to drag the case out for months. Despite their best efforts, one final piece was needed to secure Victor's conviction: a key witness. Honor knew that person could only be her. The decision tore at her. Testifying meant publicly destroying her father, ruining her family's reputation, and living as a target for the rest of her life. But if she didn't, he would find a way to escape. In a packed courtroom, Honor entered with determination, her expression resolute. When the judge summoned her to the stand, her voice rang steady. "My name is Honor Albuquerque, and I'm here to tell the truth." She revealed insider details no one else could have known. Company records she and Dante had recovered, and exclusive information that shattered her father's legal defense. Victor Albuquerque was found guilty. Sentenced to life in prison, he left the courthouse under a storm of camera flashes and shouting reporters. For the first time, he seemed truly defeated. Before being taken away, He cast a final, ice-cold glare at Honor. "You may have won. For now. But the game never ends." With the key players condemned, their fraudulent empire was dismantled, and illegal accounts were seized. The holding company Dante had once built was dissolved after an exhaustive investigation. Their former allies faced harsh sentences, ending the corrupt empire they had ruled. For Dante, however, victory came at a steep personal cost, especially for Honor, who had sacrificed everything she'd known. But one thing was certain: for the first time in a long while, they were free. Months had passed since the fall of Victor Albuquerque and Lucio Amaral. The headlines that shook the corporate world had faded over time, but for Dante Moretti and Honor Albuquerque, the events still echoed in their souls. They weren't just victors of a battle. They were survivors scarred by irreparable losses. Dante had distanced himself from the business world. He didn't want to rebuild his old empire, but to create something new, something that gave meaning to the chaos he had endured. With Honor by his side, he founded Project Rebirth, an organization dedicated to reintegrating homeless people by offering housing, jobs, and dignity. The project grew rapidly, driven by Anna's administrative expertise and Dante's indomitable charisma. What started as a small local initiative became a nationally recognized network, attracting partnerships and media attention. But the real victory wasn't the recognition. It was bringing hope where there had been only despair. Miguel, the veteran who had once helped Dante on the streets, was now part of the project's team. He was more than just a collaborator. He was living proof that even in the darkest situations, salvation was possible. "I thought I was lost forever," Miguel said emotionally during a community event. "But it seems some people never give up." Dante firmly squeezed his shoulder. There was no better answer than the grateful gaze of someone who had found their purpose again. Yet, even in the calmest moments, Dante felt the fight was far from over. The world rarely let the righteous rest for long. On a cold night, Dante was alone in the project's central office. The dim light of an old desk lamp illuminated the papers he was reviewing, casting restless shadows on the walls. The only sound breaking the absolute silence was the occasional wind against the windows. Suddenly, he heard a muffled noise coming from the hallway. His old instincts kicked in. Slowly, he got up and walked to the entrance, his steps precise and silent. There was no one there, just the cold breeze seeping through a half-closed door. That's when he noticed something. A black envelope, elegant and menacing, lay alone on the floor. He picked it up, feeling his heart pound harder, his hands steady, but his breath heavy. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper. The handwriting was meticulously precise and unmistakable. "Every empire can fall, but some kings never leave the throne. Victor Albuquerque." Dante closed his eyes for a moment. The words felt like poison. Victor was imprisoned in a maximum security penitentiary, but he was still playing the game. This wasn't just a taunt. It was a promise. With a firm motion, he crumpled the paper but didn't throw it away. He placed it in a locked drawer. Leaving it, there would be a reminder that the past never truly disappears. Being prepared was the only way to survive. The next morning, Honor found Dante quieter than usual. He was lost in thought, staring out the window at the still sleeping city. The weight of the past seemed stronger that day. "Something wrong?" she asked, approaching him. He sighed, weary. "Just old memories." Honor didn't press, but noticed the slight tremor in his voice. She touched his hand, offering silent comfort. He squeezed her fingers firmly, as if needing something solid to hold on to. "Sometimes I think this will never end," Dante confessed, his gaze distant. "No matter how hard we try, the past always finds a way back." Honor moved closer. "The past only has power if we let it. But we're not alone anymore. We don't have to fight like before." Dante met her gaze, intense and vulnerable at once. She was his anchor, his reason to keep going. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said with raw sincerity. "I never thought about giving up," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "You showed me there's something greater than revenge. Something worth building." They stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the gravity of that moment. The weight of past struggles was still there. But for the first time, moving forward seemed possible. That evening, after a long day working on the project, they stood on the central office's balcony, gazing at the city lights. The breeze blew gently, carrying a silent promise of new battles. Dante wrapped his arms around Anna, pulling her closer. His touch was protective, yet filled with a love forged through adversity. "Do you think this will ever end?" she asked, almost in a whisper. He smiled faintly, determination gleaming in his eyes. "No, some things never end. But maybe that doesn't matter anymore." She nodded, resting her head against his chest. Together, they could face anything. "The difference now," Dante continued, gently kissing her forehead, "is that we're not fighting alone anymore." The wind blew stronger, as if the world conspired to remind them that no fight was ever truly over. But they were ready. Together. Because even in the deepest shadows, there is always a light willing to resist.